Welcome. I would like to invite you to a fantastic discovery, the discovery of the secrets of the Song of Creatures by St. Francis of Assisi. In 2025, we are celebrating the 800th anniversary of the composition of this poem, which still surprises us because of its modernity. I started analyzing this text several years ago, and I made some very interesting discoveries that I would like today to share with you. Let's start from the oldest manuscript of the Cantico, and during our presentation we are going to discover that between 1224 and 1226 in Assisi, St. Francis wrote this extraordinary text. In the text, he cited all creatures, including death, with love and a fantastic optimism, and he used the creatures to praise the Lord. The style was simple, but actually it also included a series of complex notions and hidden messages revealing the deep thinking of the author. So let's go to the discovery. First of all, if we read the text, we find that the text in Italian is a little bit bizarre. So can we say that actually he was really Italian? And the answer is yes. More specifically, the initial Italian of the Umbria region, the region of St. Francis. The text also included some words in Tuscany language or French and some Latinism, but by and large he was Italian. Most importantly, he was the first example of a poem written in Italian rather than in Latin, whose author was not anonymous. Now, let's look at the very first documents in Italian. There are only a few. First of all, there is a note in a manuscript. Second, there is the so-called Placido di Capua, which is a legal text. Third, there is even an insult in a fresco in the San Clemente Church in Rome, but as we can see, there are no poems. We had to wait until 1225 to add a cantico and to add this other poem, which, however, is from an anonymous author. Now, when and where was the cantico born? Where is very simple. It was in Assisi, in the sanctuary of San Damiano, and in the palace of the bishop. The timing is a bit more complicated because it is not clear at all that it was exactly 800 years ago, that is in 1225. Most likely it was started the year before and ended in 1226, which is just before the death of St. Francis at the age of 45. But what is in reality the Cantico? Of course, it's a prayer, it is a poem, but it was also a song, because St. Francis liked to sing it, and he had even composed the music, which unfortunately was lost. At the same time, the Cantico was a text of theology presenting this optimistic vision, which was in conflict with some very pessimistic approaches that were emerging in the church and caused conflicts, sometimes violent conflicts and controversies. The poem was also a synthesis of medieval science and a collection of messages from numerology. Finally, we shall discover that the poem was also an instrument of peace. So the cantico is many things at the same time. It certainly does not reflect a naive writer as it is commonly believed. It is simple, but the simplicity originates from a derivation which is clever and starts from complex foundations. So the author was not only inspired, but also sophisticated. Now, we must stress at this point that St. Francis, contrary to a popular view, was not an ignorant. Actually, he was born in a rich and powerful family. He had received a very good education, and he completed his education by traveling extensively before and after its conversion to poverty. Actually, it was his culture, in particular the deep knowledge of the scriptures, that allows St. Francis to start the cantico based on two previous texts. The prayer of the three young men in the furnace from Daniel's book and from a psalm. We can also note that there is an important difference, that is, St. Francis did not praise the creatures, but God for having created them. Let's go to the scientific aspect, the fact that the Cantico is a short summary of medieval science. In fact, we can see here the four elements that, according to the medieval science, were the constituents of the Earth universe. We see the wind, we see the water, we see the fire and the earth. And in parallel, we also see the three elements of the sky, that is the sun, the moon, and the stars. So, in essence, St. Francis is giving us a clear message, that is, nothing is excluded from his optimistic vision of the universe. We must note that this optimistic vision was rather extraordinary. It was not a banal thing. In fact, if you consider the hard life of St. Francis' time, it was somewhat hard to imagine the nature as a sister. The nature was the cause of all sorts of problems. So when the wind was considered, what came to mind were the storms rather than the nutrition of living things. So transforming this into an optimistic view was something quite extraordinary. And now let's go to the numerology. That is this discipline that tried to attribute to numbers philosophical meanings. Let's start from the fact that in the Cantico there are exactly 33 verses. Why 33? Because 33 is a special number in numerology. For example, Jesus Christ was 33 years old at the end of his life on earth, and 33 is composed by two numbers, 3, and 3 is a special number in numerology. Actually, the special number is found many times in the text. We see here that there are 3 components of the sky, 3 terms attributed to God, and so on. So in several of these cases, 3 is associated to divinity, and the reason is that in numerology, actually, the perfect number is related to divinity. Let's go to number 4. Number 4 is 3 plus 1, and this gives the special number a concrete, a practical character. In fact, we can see the 4 edges of life, the 4 elements, and so on. Now, the number 4 is present everywhere in the Cantico. There are 4 attributes of the sun, 4 of the moon, 4 of each one of the 4 elements. Number 2 in numerology is associated to human aspects. And coherently with this interpretation, there are cases in the Cantico where 2 things are used in the text, and they have a human character. Finally, let's go to number 12, which is special in numerology because it's the product of 3 times 4, 2 special numbers. And in fact, we can cite the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 months, and so on. Now, in the Cantico, there are in fact 12 stanzas, or as they were called at that time, lassi. We can also note that many of the verses in the Cantico include 7 or 10 words, and 7 and 10 are 2 other special numbers in numerology. So basically, all the structure of the Cantico is using all the main special numbers of numerology. Now, let's go to the role as an instrument of peace. In 2026, there was in Assisi a rather strong conflict between the religious authority, that is the bishop, and the political authority, that is the mayor. The conflict was so strong that St. Francis decided to intervene. How? He added to the poem in 1226 a final part in which he praised the people who are forgiving because of the love of God. The 2 enemies were touched by these words and made peace. So after that, St. Francis was considered not just as a saint, but also as a symbol of peace and brotherhood. Now a curiosity, that is, in this very complex text, not everything can be understood. For example, we can see that St. Francis states that no man can mention the Lord. But then what he does is to start not only mentioning the Lord, but talking extensively about him. How can we justify this apparent logical conflict? Well, we could think that actually in the text is not the author that speaks, but this God. That's a fascinating interpretation, but it is not accepted by everyone, so it is still a matter of controversy. The question is still open. We are getting to the end of our presentation with an example of the conflict we mentioned between St. Francis and his optimistic philosophy and the very pessimistic views of other theologians of the time. For example, Jacopone da Todi. We can see here an example of this very dark philosophy, and we can make a direct comparison with the charming optimism of St. Francis.
Laudato si, o mio Signore, per tutte le creature, specialmente per messer frate sole, il quale porta il giorno che ci illumina, ed esso è bello e raggiante con grande splendore. Di te altissimo porta significazione, laudato sì, o mio Signore, per sora luna e le stelle, in cielo le hai formate, limpide, belle e preziose. Laudato sì, o mio Signore, per frate vento e per l'aria, le nuvole, il cielo sereno ed ogni tempo, per il quale alle tue creature dai sostentamento. Laudato sì, o mio Signore, per sora acqua, la quale è molto utile, umile, preziosa e casta. Laudato sì, o mio Signore, per frate fuoco, con il quale ci illumini la notte, ed esso è robusto, bello, forte e giocondo. Laudato sì, o mio Signore, per nostra madre terra, la quale ci sostenta e governa e produce diversi frutti con coloriti fiori ed erba.
Thank you very much for your kind attention.